On the edge of known space, where purple sunsets painted the sky in shades of lavender and gold, Marcus tended his small garden with the patience of a man who understood that good things took time to grow. The frontier planet Verdania was harsh and unforgiving, but Marcus had found peace in its wild beauty. His weathered hands moved through the soil like a prayer, coaxing life from the stubborn ground that had claimed so many other settlers. The Botanical Research Station was barely more than a collection of domes and greenhouses, but to Marcus it was home. He had come here 5 years ago, escaping the crowded cities of Earth where concrete had long ago strangled the last wild flowers. Here, among the alien plants and strange growing seasons, he had found his purpose. The morning started like any other, with Marcus checking his experimental crops and recording growth patterns in his worn journal. The planet's dual suns cast strange shadows through the transparent dome walls, and the air recyclers hummed their familiar tune. It was the sound of metal striking stone that broke the peaceful routine. Beyond the eastern ridge, where the twisted trees grew thick and dark, something had crashed. Smoke rose in thin spirals against the morning sky, and Marcus felt his heart quicken. Crash sites usually meant salvage crews and corporate investigators, neither of which brought good news to a solitary researcher who preferred his privacy. But when Marcus crested the hill, what he found changed everything. The wreckage wasn't human at all. Sleek curves of some unknown metal jutted from the ground, like the ribs of a fallen star. And beside the twisted remains, 2 figures lay motionless in the alien grass. They were clearly not human, though their basic shape was similar. Their skin held a faint blue shimmer, like moonlight on deep water, and their hair fell in silver cascades that seemed to move with a life of their own. One was taller, more angular, with fierce intelligence written in the set of her jaw even. In unconsciousness, the smaller one appeared younger, more delicate, with features that spoke of curiosity and wonder. Most people would have run. Some might have called for help or alerted the authorities. But Marcus had spent too many years watching seedlings struggle to break through hard soil to abandon anything that still drew breath. He gathered them carefully, surprised by how light they felt, and carried them back to his research station one at a time. The tall one, who would later tell him her name was Zara, awakened first. Her eyes opened like silver stars igniting, and she stared at Marcus with a mixture of fear and wonder. She spoke in a language that sounded like wind chimes and flowing water. But when Marcus offered her a cup of herbal tea brewed from his own medicinal plants, she accepted with gracious nods. The younger one, Kess, remained unconscious for 3 days. Her breathing was shallow, and strange patterns of light flickered beneath her skin like aurora dancing under ice. Marcus worked tirelessly, applying every bit of botanical knowledge he possessed. He brewed teas from healing lichens, created poultices from regenerative mosses, and sang softly to her in the ancient language his grandmother had taught him for comforting sick plants. During those 3 days, Zara watched everything. She learned human words with startling speed, and Marcus began to understand fragments of her musical language. More importantly, he began to see the person behind the alien features. Zara was proud but not arrogant, intelligent but not condescending. When she smiled, which happened rarely, it transformed her entire face into something breathtakingly beautiful. When news of the aliens spread to the nearby settlement, the response was predictably hostile. Farmer Hendricks spat on the ground and demanded they be turned over to planetary security. Merchant woman Torres crossed herself and muttered about demons from the void. Even Mayor Davidson, usually a reasonable man, suggested that harboring unknown aliens could bring down corporate sanctions on their entire colony. But Marcus stood firm. In his greenhouse, surrounded by the green things he had coaxed to life on this harsh world, he made his choice. He would protect them, just as he protected every struggling seedling that pushed up through the unforgiving soil. Kindness, he had learned, was often the only difference between life and death in the vast darkness of space. When Kess finally awakened, her first word in human language was friend, spoken while looking directly at Marcus. Her recovery was swift after that, and soon both aliens were helping him in the garden, their hands seeming to know exactly what each plant needed. Under their touch, his crops grew stronger and more abundant than ever before. But even as Marcus grew to love their presence, he sensed they were hiding something important. Sometimes he caught them staring at the stars with expressions of deep longing, and they spoke in hushed tones in their own language when they thought he couldn't hear. Still, he asked no questions that they weren't ready to answer, content simply to share his world with two souls who had fallen from the sky into his quiet life. Seeds of memory. 10 years had passed since that morning when two figures fell from the stars. Marcus had long since stopped scanning the skies for signs of their return. The research station had grown into a thriving agricultural center, and Marcus himself had become something of a legend among the frontier colonies. The techniques he had developed, inspired by half-remembered lessons from his vanished friends, had revolutionized farming on dozens of harsh worlds, yet success felt hollow without Zara and Kes to share it. Marcus had published papers on symbiotic plant relationships, written guides for adaptive botany, and even trained a new generation of agricultural specialists. But in the quiet moments between achievements, he still found himself setting 3 plates for dinner before remembering that he lived alone. The planet Verdania had changed too. What had once been a struggling frontier settlement now bustled with activity. New domes and growing towers stretched toward the alien sky, and the population had swollen to nearly 50,000 souls. Marcus often felt like a stranger in the place he had helped build. Watching from his original research station as progress marched past his door, Dr. Elena Vasquez, his former student and now colleague, often worried about his solitude. She would arrive at the station with fresh supplies and newer equipment, but Marcus preferred his old tools and simple methods. The plants responded to gentleness and patience, not to the latest technological innovations that the corporate sponsors kept pushing. "You're living in the past, Marcus," Elena would say, gesturing at his handwritten journals and worn gardening tools. "The new bioenhancers could triple your yield in half the time." But Marcus would just smile and continue his work. Some things couldn't be rushed or improved upon. The memory of Zara's hands moving through soil like water, the way Kes could sense a plant's needs with just a touch. These were lessons no machine could teach. The crisis began quietly, as most disasters do. The Verdanian wheat, the colony's primary export crop, started showing signs of genetic breakdown. At first it was just a few stunted stalks in the northern fields, but within months the blight had spread across 3 continents. The genetic modifications that had allowed Earth crops to thrive in alien soil were failing, and no amount of fertilizer or treatment could stop the decay. Marcus threw himself into finding a solution with desperate intensity. He worked 18-hour days, testing soil samples and analyzing plant DNA until his eyes burned from exhaustion. The corporate backers grew increasingly nervous as their projected profits crumbled along with the crops, and pressure mounted for radical solutions, like atmospheric terraforming or complete genetic replacement of all plant life. But Marcus remembered something Zara had shown him years ago: how plants from different worlds could share strength through their root systems if given the right conditions. He had been experimenting with this symbiotic approach for years, but never on such a massive scale. Now, with time running out and his world facing economic collapse, he decided to risk everything on a technique inspired by alien wisdom. Working in secret, Marcus began introducing carefully selected native plants into the failing wheat fields, not to replace the earth crops, but to support them through underground networks of shared nutrients and genetic information. It was delicate work, requiring perfect timing and an intuitive understanding of how different species communicated through chemical signals in the soil. The first signs of success appeared just as the last of his savings ran out. Green shoots pushed through the brown wasteland with renewed vigor, and the wheat began to recover its genetic stability. Within a few months, the harvest was not only saved but improved, producing grain with higher nutritional content and better resistance to local environmental stresses. News of Marcus's breakthrough spread quickly through the colonial networks, bringing him fame and recognition he had never sought. Agricultural corporations offered him fortunes for exclusive rights to his techniques. and scientific institutions begged him to relocate to more prestigious positions on core worlds. But Marcus stayed on Verdania, in his simple research station, surrounded by the gardens that held his deepest memories. On clear nights, when the twin moons cast silver light across the fields he had saved, he would stand outside and search the stars for any sign of the friends who had taught him that kindness could bloom even in the harshest soil. He never noticed the faint energy readings. The first alarm sounded at dawn, piercing the peaceful morning air like a scream from the void itself. Marcus looked up from his journal, where he had been recording the latest growth patterns in his experimental hybrid crops, and felt his heart skip as emergency broadcasts began flooding the planetary communication network. Massive, unidentified vessel detected in outer system. The automated voice announced with mechanical calm that belied the chaos erupting across Verdania. All civilian craft ordered to maintain minimum safe distance. Military response units deploying to intercept. Marcus set down his pen and walked to the observation dome, where a small telescope allowed him to study the distant stars. What he saw there made his breath catch in his throat. A ship hung in the darkness beyond the outer planets, but calling it a ship seemed inadequate. It was more like a floating city, all graceful curves and gleaming surfaces that caught and reflected starlight like captured diamonds. The vessel was impossibly large, easily dwarfing the entire colonial defense fleet that was scrambling to respond. Yet it made no aggressive moves, simply hanging in space like a patient giant waiting for some unknown signal. Its design was unlike anything in human technology, with flowing lines that seemed to grow rather than be constructed, as if the ship itself were some vast living thing. Panic spread through the colony faster than wildfire. Families packed their belongings and fled to underground shelters, while militia units took defensive positions around the major population centers. The corporate administrators locked themselves in their fortified headquarters and demanded immediate evacuation to safer worlds. But Marcus found himself oddly calm, something deep in his memory stirring like seeds awakening after a long winter. The alien ship made its intentions clear by the simple act of descending toward the planet's surface. It moved with liquid grace, defying every law of physics that Marcus understood, until it settled in the vast meadow just beyond his research station. The ship was even more magnificent up close, its hull shimmering with patterns that seemed to shift and change like living aurora. For 3 hours, nothing happened. The colonial defense forces maintained their perimeter. Weapons trained on the silent vessel, while news crews broadcast frantic speculation to the rest of human space. Then, as the afternoon sun reached its zenith, a section of the ship's hull simply faded away like morning mist, revealing a ramp that extended gracefully to the alien grass. 2 figures walked down that ramp, and Marcus felt 20 years fall away in an instant. Zara moved with the same quiet dignity he remembered, though she now wore robes that seemed woven from starlight itself. Beside her, Kess had grown into stunning maturity, her silver hair flowing behind her like a banner of liquid moonlight. They were exactly as beautiful as he remembered, yet somehow more. There was power in their bearing now, authority that spoke of high rank and great responsibility. But when Zara's silver eyes met his across the meadow, he saw the same gentle soul who had once helped him tend seedlings in his simple greenhouse. "Marcus?" she called, and her voice carried clearly across the distance, despite the chaos surrounding them. Military officers shouted orders and weapons powered up with threatening hums, but Zara paid them no attention. Her focus was entirely on the man who had once shared his last piece of bread with 2 strangers who had fallen from the sky. Marcus began walking toward them, ignoring the protests of security personnel who tried to hold him back. With each step, memories flooded back with crystal clarity. The taste of herbal tea brewed from healing plants, the sound of alien laughter in his greenhouse, the gentle touch of silver hands as they worked together in the soil. When they met in the middle of the meadow, surrounded by the crops that Marcus had saved using techniques they had taught him, no words seemed adequate. Zara reached out tentatively, as if afraid he might disappear like a dream, and Marcus took her hand in his weathered ones. "We searched for you, Kess," said, tears glistening in her silver eyes. For 10 years, we searched every world, every colony, but the record said you had died in a transport accident. We never stopped looking. We had to leave, Zara explained, her voice thick with emotion. Our people were being hunted, and staying would have brought death to your doorstep. But we never forgot your kindness, Marcus. It changed everything. For our entire civilization, as they spoke, more figures emerged from the ship. Tall, dignified beings dressed in robes of shifting colors, their bearing marking them as important officials or royalty. Marcus realized with growing amazement that his simple act of compassion had somehow elevated to refugee children to positions of great power among their people. The reunion was interrupted by the arrival of colonial authorities, led by a nervous administrator who clearly wished he were anywhere else. Negotiations began immediately, though they were hardly necessary. The aliens, who called themselves the Stellari Confederation, had come not as conquerors, but as friends, seeking the human who had once saved 2 of their own. As the sun set over Verdania, painting the sky in familiar shades of purple and gold, Marcus found himself aboard the alien vessel that was worth more than entire planetary systems. But all the marvels of advanced technology paled beside the simple joy of sitting with old friends, sharing stories of the years that had passed like seeds scattered on fertile ground. The universe had returned his kindness tenfold. But the greatest gift was the one thing no amount of wealth could buy: the chance to see Zara smile once more. Aboard the Stellari vessel, Marcus felt like he was walking through a dream woven from starlight and impossible beauty. The ship's interior defied every notion he had about spacecraft design, with corridors that curved like riverbeds and chambers that seemed to grow from the walls themselves. Bioluminescent patterns flowed along the surfaces, providing gentle light that shifted with the rhythms of some vast, living heartbeat. Zara led him through this wonder with the easy grace of someone born to command, but Marcus could see the nervous energy in her movements. She was different now, more confident and powerful. Yet the way she glanced at him when she thought he wasn't looking reminded him of the frightened refugee he had once sheltered. "This is your private chamber," she said, gesturing to quarters that were larger than his entire research station. The walls were transparent, offering a breathtaking view of Verdania's twin moons, while the furnishings seemed to adjust themselves to his presence with subtle intelligence. Marcus touched one of the flowing walls, feeling warmth beneath his fingers like the pulse of life itself. "How is all this possible?" he asked, wonder coloring his voice. "Our ships are grown, not built," Zara explained, moving closer to him. "They're living beings in their own right, symbiotic partners rather than mere vehicles. Everything you see here is alive, responding to the needs and emotions of those within." As she spoke, the room's lighting shifted to warmer tones, and Marcus realized the ship was somehow sensing the growing intimacy between them. After 10 years of separation, they were both struggling with emotions too complex for simple words. "Zara," he began, but she silenced him with a gentle touch to his lips. Her skin still held that faint shimmer he remembered, like moonlight on deep water, and her proximity made his heart race like a young man's. "There's something you need to understand," she said, her silver eyes holding depths of emotion that took his breath away. "Among my people, I am no longer simply Zara. I am first daughter of the stellar throne, heir to a confederation that spans 1,000 worlds." Marcus felt a chill of understanding. "And I'm just a botanist from a frontier colony." "No," she said fiercely, her hands framing his face. "You are the human who taught me what love truly means. In all our advanced civilization, with all our technology and wisdom, we had forgotten the simple power of kindness without expectation of reward. You gave us hope when we had none, and that gift changed the course of history itself." She told him then of the years that followed their departure, how they had returned to their people as refugees, bearing tales of a human who had risked everything to protect strangers. The story had spread through the Stellari Confederation like wildfire, sparking a philosophical revolution that challenged millennia of isolation and suspicion toward other species. "The hardliners called us contaminated," Kess added, joining them in the chamber with her characteristic quiet grace. She had grown into a stunning woman. her silver hair now marked with subtle braids that indicated her rank as a stellar navigator. They said contact with humans had made us weak and sentimental. But others saw wisdom in your actions, Zara continued. They realized that a civilization built only on logic and efficiency was missing something essential. Your compassion became the foundation for a new way of thinking about our place in the universe. The political implications were staggering. Marcus learned that his simple act of feeding 2 hungry refugees had prevented an interstellar war. The Stellari had been preparing to eliminate what they saw as the threat of expanding human civilization. But the testimony of Zara and Kes had stayed their hand. Now, years later, the Confederation sought alliance rather than conquest. They offered trade agreements, cultural exchange, and technological partnerships that could lift human civilization to unimaginable heights. All because one man had chosen kindness over fear, but the personal cost was becoming clear. As they sat together in the gentle glow of the ship's living walls, Zara spoke of the loneliness that had consumed her during their separation. She had been forced into a political marriage to cement an alliance, though the arrangement was more symbolic than romantic. Her true heart had remained on Verdania, in the gardens where Marcus had first shown her what it meant to nurture life, without seeking dominance over it. I dreamed of you every night, she whispered, her hand finding his in the starlight streaming through the transparent walls. I would close my eyes and remember the taste of your herbal tea, the sound of your voice singing to sick plants, the gentleness in your eyes when you looked at 2 frightened strangers. Marcus felt his own eyes growing moist as she spoke. The years of solitude, the endless searching of the night sky, the ache of wondering if she had ever truly existed, all of it melted away as she leaned against him, at her head finding its natural place on his shoulder. I never stopped hoping, he admitted. Even when logic told me you were gone forever, my heart refused to accept it. I built my entire life around the lessons you taught me, waiting for a miracle that everyone else said would never come. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, like the first green shoot pushing through difficult soil. But as the ship's lights dimmed in response to their emotions, passion grew between them like wildfire in a summer drought. 10 years of separation and longing poured out in desperate caresses and whispered endearments that transcended the boundaries of language and species. Later, as they lay entwined beneath covers that adjusted their warmth to match their body temperature, Zara traced patterns on Marcus's chest with fingertips that seemed to leave trails of starlight on his skin. There will be challenges, she warned. Softly, my people are not used to change, and a union between stellary royalty and a human commoner will shock many. The hardliners will use it as proof that we have been corrupted by contact with your species. Marcus pulled her closer, breathing in the subtle fragrance of her hair that reminded him of night-blooming flowers on his home world. Then we'll face those challenges together, he said. After all, the best gardens grow from the most difficult soil. Outside their chamber, the vast ship continued its orbit around Verdania, its living hull pulsing with the rhythm of a heart that beat for love across the cosmos. The wedding ceremony took place 3 months later, in the Crystal Amphitheater at the heart of the stellary vessel, with representatives from 100 worlds bearing witness to something unprecedented in galactic history. Marcus stood beneath an arch of living crystal that sang harmonies older than human civilization, wearing robes that shifted color with his emotions while his heart hammered against his ribs. Zara approached him through corridors of starlight, accompanied by Kes, in a procession of stellari nobles whose expressions ranged from curious to openly hostile. Her wedding gown seemed woven from captured aurora, flowing and shifting as she moved, while a crown of living metal rested lightly on her silver hair. She was breathtakingly beautiful, but more importantly, she was his. The ceremony itself blended traditions from both cultures. Marcus had requested that Alina, his former student, serve as his human witness, while representatives of the colonial government looked on with barely concealed amazement at the political implications. The stellari rituals involved harmonics. That made the ship itself resonate like a vast musical instrument, while human customs added warmth and intimacy to the ancient proceedings. When the time came for vows, Marcus spoke from his heart rather than from any prepared script. 10 years ago, you fell from the sky into my garden, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the crystal chamber. You taught me that kindness knows no boundaries, that love can grow in the harshest soil, and that hope can survive any winter. Today, I promise to tend our love like the rarest flower, with patience, gentleness, and faith in tomorrow's bloom. Zara's response came in the musical language of her people, but her words were translated for the human witnesses. Me, that strength is not found in power over others, but in the courage to care when caring seems foolish. You taught me that home is not a place but a feeling, and that feeling lives now in my heart wherever you are. I promise to honor the garden we will grow together across all the stars and all the years that await us. The moment their hands touched, in the final ritual, the entire ship responded with a symphony of light that flowed through its living walls like liquid music. Even the hardliners seemed moved by the raw emotion of the ceremony, though Marcus noticed several still wearing expressions of stern disapproval. The celebration that followed lasted 3 days and spanned multiple star systems as the Confederation fleet moved through space in a processional that would be remembered for centuries. But Marcus found his greatest joy in the quiet moments with Zara. Walking through the ship's magnificent gardens, where plants from 1,000 worlds grew in perfect harmony. This is what our future could look like, Zara said, gesturing to the impossible beauty surrounding them. Not conquest or domination, but cooperation, your people and mine learning from each other, sharing knowledge and wonder. Marcus nodded, his hands already dirty from examining alien soil compositions that could revolutionize agriculture throughout human space. The galaxy is large enough for all of us to grow. Their honeymoon was spent establishing the first joint research station on the border between human and stellar space, a facility that would serve as both scientific laboratory and cultural embassy. Marcus brought his expertise in adaptive botany, while Zara contributed stellar biotechnology that could transform entire ecosystems. Working together, they developed techniques that could make desert worlds bloom and turn lifeless rocks into gardens of impossible beauty. Their success attracted scientists and diplomats from dozens of species, creating a hub of cooperation that grew more influential with each passing year. But the project's greatest achievement was more personal than political. As Marcus and Zara worked side by side in their research domes, tending experimental crops that represented the marriage of two civilizations, they began to talk about children. The biological challenges were significant. Stellary and human genetics were not naturally compatible, but love, they were learning, had a way of overcoming seemingly impossible obstacles. Kes, now serving as Marcus's research partner and Zara's trusted advisor, had been experimenting with genetic harmonization techniques that could make such unions possible. Her own romantic life had blossomed with a human botanist named David, who had volunteered for the border station, proving that the connection between their species ran deeper than politics or biology. On the first anniversary of their wedding, as the twin suns of the research station's host world painted the sky in familiar shades of purple and gold, Zara announced that she was carrying the first human Stellari hybrid child in galactic history. The news sent shockwaves through both civilizations, but Marcus felt only joy as he placed his hand on her still flat belly and imagined the miracle growing within. Their daughter, when she was born, possessed her mother's silver eyes and her father's gentle nature, with abilities that surpassed either parents' individual gifts. She could sense the emotional state of plants and animals across vast distances, and her presence seemed to accelerate growth and healing in everything around her. As Marcus held his newborn daughter beneath the stars that had brought him and Zara together, he thought about the simple act of kindness that had started it all. Feeding to hungry refugees had seemed like such a small thing at the time, yet it had grown into something that changed the course of galactic civilization. The research station continued to expand, becoming a symbol of hope and cooperation that attracted beings from across the known galaxy. Marcus found himself at the center of a revolution in interspecies relations, though he remained the same humble gardener at heart, more interested in coaxing life from difficult soil than in the political implications of his work. Years passed, like seasons in a well-tended garden, each bringing new growth and deeper understanding. Marcus and Zara raised their daughter to appreciate both her human and Stellari heritage, while their research station became a thriving city where dozens of species lived and worked in harmony on quiet evenings. When the day's work was done, and their daughter played among the hybrid flowers that bloomed only in the light of alien stars, Marcus and Zara would sit together and marvel at the garden they had grown from a single seed of compassion. Love, they had learned, was indeed the most powerful force in the universe. It's capable of bridging any distance and overcoming any obstacle. When tended with care and patience, the stars that had once seemed cold and distant now felt like old friends. Witness to a love story that had transformed not just to hearts, but the future of galactic civilization itself.